The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the rolling hills of Adams, Tennessee, as the Bell family arrived at their new homestead in the autumn of 1804. John Bell, a man of weathered hands and a determined spirit, surveyed the sprawling fields that promised both bounty and labor. With his wife Lucy and their 3 children, Elizabeth, Richard, and the youngest, a spirited girl named Mary, the family dismounted from their wagon, dust swirling around their boots as they stepped onto the unbroken soil of their new life. The landscape was a canvas of vibrant green, dotted with the brilliant hues of autumn leaves. Tall oaks and whispering pines framed their clearing, while the distant calls of wildlife echoed through the woods. The family set to work, their hearts buoyed by the hope of a fresh start. Each shovelful of earth turned, each seed sown, breathed life into the dreams they harbored for prosperity and peace. As the seasons turned, the Bell homestead began to take shape. The children dashed about, their laughter mingling with the sounds of nature, while John toiled in the fields, plowing and planting with an unwavering resolve. Lucy, ever the heart of the home, cultivated a garden that thrived under her careful nurturing, providing sustenance for the family and a sense of comfort amidst the backbreaking labor. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened, an unsettling aura began to envelop the homestead. It started subtly, a faint rustling in the underbrush, the echo of footsteps that seemed to follow the children as they played. At first, the family dismissed it as mere imagination, the remnants of fatigue from their relentless toil. But soon, odd occurrences escalated. The clatter of pots and pans in the night, whispers that danced on the edge of hearing, and a disembodied voice that seemed to call out from the darkness. By 1817, 5 years into their settlement, the peculiar happenings had transformed from mere nuisances to a relentless torment. The children trembled as strange knocks echoed through the walls, and Elizabeth, the eldest, became the focus of the unseen presence that seemed intent on making its mark. Late at night, she would wake, her heart pounding, as the voice, a raspy whisper, proclaimed her name, filling her with dread. The family gathered by the flickering hearth, huddled beneath the dim light, seeking solace in each other's presence, while the weight of the unknown pressed upon them. Word of the Bell family's plight spread through the surrounding community, drawing curious neighbors and the superstitious alike to their door. The once welcoming fields that had promised hope now served as the backdrop for whispered tales and fearful glances. Skeptics and believers mingled, each drawn to the inexplicable happenings that seemed to defy reason. The family found themselves at the center of an unfolding enigma, caught between the mundane challenges of farming life and the supernatural forces that threatened to unravel their very existence. As the years slipped by, the tension within the Bell household grew palpable. The laughter of children dulled, replaced by the haunting echoes of their unseen tormentor. John Bell, once a figure of strength and purpose, became a shadow of his former self, his brow furrowed with worry and sleepless nights. The fertile land that had promised a bountiful harvest now bore witness to a struggle far beyond the plow, a battle with the unknown that would etch the Bell family's name into the annals of history, forever entwined with the haunting of Adams, Tennessee. As the golden hues of autumn settled over the rolling hills of Tennessee in 1817, a restless unease crept into the modest home of the Bell family. The crackling of the hearth fire mingled with the crisp air, yet an inexplicable chill settled heavily upon the household, suffusing every corner with a sense of foreboding. The family, consisting of John Bell, his wife Lucy, and their 5 children, had always found comfort in the simplicity of farm life. But now, shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and the familiar creaks of the floorboards felt charged with an ominous energy. It began one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that whispered of the unknown. The family had gathered around the supper table, laughter mingling with the scent of cornbread and simmering stew, when a sudden, sharp rap echoed through the room. The sound was not the gentle tapping of wind against the windows. It was a deliberate knock, firm and insistent. The laughter faltered, eyes glancing toward the door as if dreading the revelation of a visitor. "Did anyone knock?" John asked, brow furrowed, his fork pausing mid-air. Silence fell like a heavy cloak, enfolding them in uncertainty. Lucy shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her plate. The children shifted in their seats, their wide eyes darting toward the dimly lit hallway, where shadows loomed like uninvited guests. The following days brought forth an unsettling string of occurrences. Knocking morphed into scratching, a relentless clawing sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls of their home. It scraped against the timber in a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat, and the family's peace began to fray at the edges. John, a man of stoic resolve, attempted to brush off the disturbances as mere figments of imagination, the result of tired minds wrought from the labors of the day. Yet as the nights wore on, even he could not quell the growing dread that gnawed at his insides. One night, while the children were tucked in their beds, the scratching intensified, escalating into a cacophony that rattled the windows. John and Lucy exchanged glances, the unspoken acknowledgement of their mutual fear hanging between them. What spirit, what entity had come to haunt their hearth? Gathering his courage, John rose from his chair, the sound of the wood creaking beneath him echoing in the stillness. "I shall investigate," he declared, though his voice quivered as he spoke. The children huddled together, eyes wide with terror, while Lucy clutched her apron, her heart racing in tandem with the frantic scratching that now seemed to reverberate within her very bones. With a lantern held high, John stepped into the darkness of the hallway, the flickering light casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of the unknown. As he reached the source of the sound, the scratching ceased abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence that enveloped him like a shroud. "Show yourself," John called, a mix of bravado and desperation lacing his voice. But the only answer was the distant hoot of an owl, echoing like a ghostly reminder that the woods outside were alive with the mysteries of the night. Returning to the warmth of the hearth, the family sat in fearful silence, their hearts beating in unison with the quiet, as if waiting for the next sign of the disturbance that had invaded their once quiet life. The autumn wind howled outside, a portent of the trials to come, for the Bell family was but on the precipice of a harrowing journey into the unknown. In the autumn of 1817, the Bell family of Red River, Tennessee, found themselves ensnared in a web of dread that would soon echo through the valleys and hills of the region. It was a damp evening, the heavy air laden with the scent of decaying leaves, as 11-year-old Betsy Bell, affectionately known as Katie, played in the flickering candlelight of their modest home. The soft crackle of the hearth mingled with the distant rustle of the woods, yet an unsettling chill crept into the corners of the room. As the twilight deepened, Katie felt an inexplicable sensation, a prickling on the nape of her neck, a whisper of movement that sent shivers down her spine. She paused mid-laughter, her small hands clutching the edges of her apron. The mirth from earlier faded, replaced by a heavy silence that draped itself over the family like a shroud. The room, once filled with the warmth of familial joy, now felt foreign and cold. Suddenly, a sharp tug at her hair brought a startled gasp from her lips. She spun around, her wide eyes searching the shadows. "Mama, something's pulling my hair," she cried, her voice a mixture of fear and disbelief. The matronly figure of Lucy Bell, her mother, rushed to her side, concern etching lines across her brow. "Now, Katie, it's just the wind playing tricks," Lucy soothed, though her own heart raced as she scanned the dim corners of their home. The flickering candlelight danced ominously, casting erratic shadows that seemed to tease at her daughter's fear. But Katie's protests grew louder. "No, Mama, it pinched me too." She rubbed her arm vigorously, where she claimed a sharp pain lingered, as if some unseen hand had left its mark. The tales of spirits and witches whispered among the townsfolk began to swirl in Lucy's mind, igniting a primal fear that had long lain dormant. As the days passed, the peculiar occurrences intensified. Katie's cries pierced the peaceful countryside, echoing through the thick woods that enveloped their homestead. Her father, John Bell, a man of stern resolve, witnessed his daughter's anguish with mounting alarm. "I will not have my family haunted by phantoms," he declared one evening, clenching his fists in frustration. Yet the unseen force seemed relentless, pulling at Katie's hair and pinching her with alarming frequency. The family's nightly rituals turned to anxious whispers. The hearth, once a gathering place, became a sanctuary of fear. Neighbors began to notice the change. The once lively laughter of the Bell household now replaced by fearful murmurs and hushed tones. Word spread quickly through the neighboring settlements. Curiosity mingled with trepidation as townsfolk gathered to witness the Bell family's plight. Some arrived with dismissive laughter, others with solemn faces, clutching their Bibles as they sought to understand this growing mystery. One fateful night, the Bell home was filled with visitors, skeptics and believers alike. As they huddled together, discussing theories and remedies, Katie's cries erupted once more. "It's here! The thing is here!" she screamed, as unseen hands tugged at her hair and pinched her sides, leaving no doubt that something otherworldly had taken residence within their very walls. In the dim light, eyes locked onto the girl. A palpable tension hung in the air, thick as the smoke curling from the fireplace. The room felt alive with a mixture of fear and fascination, as the Bell family stood at the precipice of a mystery that would soon capture the attention of far more than their small community. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a tale that would ripple through history, forever entwining the Bell name with the supernatural. In the autumn of 1818, the air in the small community of Red River, Tennessee, grew thick with whispers and uncertainty. The Bell family, once known for their geniality and hard work, had become the epicenter of a chilling phenomenon that drew neighbors and curious townsfolk like moths to a flickering flame. Reports of strange disturbances emanating from their modest farmhouse spread through the scattered settlements, igniting both sympathy and intrigue among the populace. It began one fateful evening when John Bell, a farmer of stout build and unyielding demeanor, was jolted from his slumber by an insistent, rasping voice that echoed throughout the stillness of the night. "Wake up, John Bell," it croaked, as if the very shadows of the room had conspired to torment him. He bolted upright, heart thrumming wildly, only to find his wife, Lucy, equally startled, her eyes wide with terror. "Did you hear it?" she gasped, clutching the quilt that had slipped to her lap. The following days saw an escalation of the disturbances. Strange noises invaded their home, the sound of scratching at the walls, disembodied whispers that drifted through the air like a spectral breeze, and the unsettling thuds that echoed in the stillness of night. Their children, Betsy and her brothers, were particularly affected, often found trembling in corners, haunted by the unseen presence that seemed to lurk just beyond their sight. As the tales of the Bell haunting spread, neighbors ventured forth from their own hearths, driven by both fear and morbid curiosity. They arrived in droves, men and women alike, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of torches and lanterns. They gathered outside the Bell home, some clutching weapons for protection, others bringing offerings of food and comfort. The air hummed with tension and speculation. Murmurs of witchcraft and vengeance swirled through the crowd like leaves caught in a tempest. "Is it true? Can the spirits of the dead walk among us?" a stout farmer questioned, his voice gruff yet laced with unease. The crowd nodded, eyes wide, as tales of the Bell family's plight unfolded in hushed tones. Each account only added to the weight of apprehension that hung over the farmhouse like a storm cloud. Inside, John Bell's resolute spirit began to waver. The sleepless nights coiled like serpents around his mind, and he often found himself staring into the flickering embers of the hearth, seeking solace in their warmth. Lucy, too, felt the pressure of the unfolding drama. Her once vibrant laughter was replaced by a quiet resignation, as the very walls of their home seemed to conspire against them. As the days turned into weeks, the disturbances intensified. The townsfolk grew restless, and the air thickened with fear. One evening, a gathering of neighbors decided to confront the unseen force. They armed themselves with salt and prayers, and with hearts pounding like war drums, they crossed the threshold of the Bell home. The atmosphere was charged, electric with dread, as they called out to the entity, demanding it reveal itself. A sudden stillness enveloped the room, and then, as if answering their challenge, a cacophony erupted. Furniture rattled violently, and a sharp voice sliced through the air. "I am here." The townsfolk reeled back, their faces pale with horror, yet they could not flee. drawn in by the magnetic pull of the mystery that now enveloped the Bell family. In that moment, the Bell home became a crucible of fear and fascination, a place where the veil between the living and the dead appeared to flutter, leaving the community forever altered by what they had witnessed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the haunting only deepened, entwining the fates of the Bell family and their neighbors in a dark tapestry from which none could escape unscathed. In the dim light of a flickering oil lamp, the Bell family huddled in their modest parlor, the air thick with an oppressive silence. Outside, the winds howled through the dense Tennessee woods, rustling the leaves like whispers of old secrets. It was the winter of 1818, and the biting cold seeped through the cracks of their wooden home. But it was not the chill of the season that had set their hearts racing. A strange presence, unseen yet palpably felt, had taken residence among them. It began with the scratching, soft at first, like the timid claws of a woodland creature, but soon escalating into a cacophony of raps and thuds that echoed through the night. The family, once untroubled on their farmstead, now found themselves tormented by an entity that refused to be ignored. As the days turned to weeks, their fear morphed into desperation. They sought the counsel of neighbors who whispered the name Kate with both reverence and trepidation, warning that a witch had come to haunt them. Then, on a particularly stormy evening, the air crackled with an energy that sent shivers down the spines of the Bell family. As John Bell, the patriarch, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in worry, he called out into the shadows, "Who are you? What do you want from us?" His voice trembled, betraying the resolve he wished to project. The response was swift, a disembodied voice slicing through the stillness, sharp and mocking. "I am Kate," it declared. The voice was both melodic and sinister, echoing off the walls like the laughter of a madwoman. "I am a witch, and you have summoned me." Panic surged in the room, and the children clutched each other, their wide eyes reflecting the dim light of the lamp. The entity's declaration hung heavy in the air, and a palpable tension gripped the family. "What have we done to anger you?" John pleaded, desperation lacing his words. "Anger me?" Kate's voice rippled with amusement. "You know not the truths I hold. Secrets lie buried deep in your hearts, and I shall reveal them one by one." With that, the atmosphere shifted, thickening with an uncanny foreboding. The entity began to unveil the family's hidden transgressions, exposing personal grievances and long-held grudges. "Oh, how you fret over the lost crops, John, yet you never confessed to the pact you made with old Tom. And you, Lucy, your heart wanders while your husband toils in the fields." Gasps filled the room as each revelation struck like a thunderclap. The walls, once a sanctuary, seemed to close in, the shadows stretching into grotesque shapes that danced around them. The children whimpered, curling against their mother, whose face had gone pale, the color drained by the weight of their truths laid bare. As the words hung in the air, a fragile thread of sanity began to unravel. The family, once unified by love and toil, now found themselves ensnared in a web of fear and suspicion. Each glance filled with accusation. The laughter of Kate echoed in their minds, a haunting reminder of their vulnerabilities. In the days that followed, the Bell family would seek solace in prayer, invoking the protection of the Almighty against the specter that tormented them. But Kate, the witch unveiled, would not relent. She was now a part of their lives, an unseen specter weaving a tale of dread that would echo through the annals of Tennessee's haunted history. The entity had revealed itself, and with it, the darkness that lay within the hearts of those who once knew only peace. The soft light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the log cabin walls, casting a muted glow upon the weary faces of the Bell family. The air in the small home was thick with a sense of dread, as the unseen presence that had tormented them for nearly 2 years continued its relentless assault on the household. It was the year 1819, and John Bell, once a robust farmer, now seemed a mere shadow of the man he had been. His health had declined rapidly, each day marked by fresh torment, withdrawing him further from the land he loved. As the sun rose over the rolling hills of Tennessee, casting golden rays upon the fields, John sat slumped in his chair, the weight of the world pressing down upon him. His skin, pale and drawn, bore witness to the persistent affliction that had plagued him. Gone were the days of carefree laughter and robust health. Now, he was haunted by a relentless specter that seemed to thrive on his suffering. The entity's whispering taunts had become a fixture in his life, curling around him like a fog, sapping his strength and resolve. Katie Bell, his devoted wife, moved quietly about the kitchen, her hands trembling as she prepared a meager breakfast. The clatter of pots and pans seemed to disturb the silence that had settled over the family like a shroud. She cast a worried glance toward her husband, noting the deep lines of fatigue etched upon his brow. The children, too, had begun to take notice of their father's frailty, exchanging furtive glances, their innocence overshadowed by the grim reality of their home. That morning, as John attempted to rise from his chair, a sudden jolt of pain shot through him, causing him to gasp and clutch his chest. The sound echoed ominously in the stillness, and Katie rushed to his side, her heart racing. "John, please," she implored, her voice trembling. "You mustn't push yourself. The children need you." But John's eyes, once filled with the warmth of life, now reflected a deep-seated despair. "I cannot escape it, Katie. It is as if the very essence of my being is being drained by this witch," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The shadows in the room seemed to darken at his words, as though the entity itself was lurking, relishing the sorrow it had wrought. The children gathered around their father, their faces taut with worry. Betsy, the youngest, clutched a worn doll to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. "Is the witch going to take you away, Papa?" she asked, her voice quivering like a leaf in the wind. At that moment, the air grew heavy, a palpable tension settling over the family as the specter of despair loomed larger. As the days turned into weeks, John's condition continued to worsen. His once strong hands trembled. Unable to grasp the tools necessary for tending to the fields, the family, once vibrant and filled with hope, now found themselves ensnared in a web of fear. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones about the Bell family, speculating on the source of their plight, some suggesting that the witch was indeed targeting John, seeking to bring him to his grave. The nights were the worst. Shadows danced along the walls, and the whispers grew louder, filling the corners of the cabin with a chilling presence. Katie lay awake beside her husband, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the entity's focus had turned to him, seeking to drain the very life from his body. She could only pray for deliverance, for the strength to withstand the torment that had gripped their home. As John Bell's health continued to decline, the family could only brace themselves for what seemed an inevitable conclusion. The haunting had taken a toll greater than they had ever imagined, and with each passing day, the stakes rose higher, as they clung to hope amidst the encroaching darkness. As the sun dipped below the rolling hills of Tennessee in the autumn of 1819, the shadows lengthened and the air grew thick with an unsettling tension. The Bell family's farm, a patchwork of tilled earth and flourishing orchards, seemed to hold its breath, caught in the grip of a malevolent force that had tormented them for years. In the flickering light of the fire, John Bell sat in his worn wooden chair, the lines of worry etched deep into his weathered face. While his children exchanged anxious glances, their youthful faces pale against the encroaching darkness, the enigmatic presence that haunted the Bells had intensified in recent weeks, its whispers growing louder and more demanding, as if the very walls of their home were alive with the malignancy of a vengeful spirit. Kate, the entity that had gripped their lives with terror, had escalated her threats, her voice a chilling specter that echoed through the halls, chilling the bones of all who heard it. "Leave this place," she had commanded, a disembodied whisper laced with fury and malice, "or I shall take the life of your father." John's heart raced at the thought. The patriarch of the family, he was their anchor, the steadfast provider who had weathered the harshest storms of life. Yet here he sat, trembling not from fear of the specter, but from the dread of what losing his life would mean for his beloved family. His wife, Lucy, fidgeted with her apron, her hands shaking as she poured a cup of tea, the steam swirling in the dim light, contrasting sharply with the cold dread that settled over the room. "Father," said his eldest son, Joel, his voice a mixture of defiance and fear. "We cannot allow her to dictate our lives. We must stand our ground." The resolve in Joel's voice was commendable, but John could see the flicker of uncertainty in his son's eyes. The weight of the ultimatum lay heavily upon them, a menacing cloud that threatened to swallow the very essence of their home. "No good can come from defiance," John replied, his voice low and measured. "We must think wisely. If we leave, will she not follow us? This land has been our home for generations. It is where our ancestors toiled and bled. We must protect it, even if it means confronting this evil." As night deepened, the oppressive silence of the farm was punctuated by the crackling of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl, a reminder of the world outside their troubled haven. The children huddled closer to their father, seeking comfort in his presence, as the shadows danced ominously around them. Each creak of the floorboards felt magnified, every gust of wind a whisper of Kate's threats. In the corner of the room, the old clock ticked relentlessly, each chime marking the passage of time and the growing dread that enveloped them. The family's fate hung precariously in the balance, with the specter of death looming over their heads, a grim reminder of the fragile line between life and loss. As the fire flickered low, John Bell's heart swelled with determination. He would not let fear rule them. They would face Kate together, for the love of family and the sanctity of their home demanded nothing less. As the night wore on, a promise of reckoning hung in the air, thick and palpable, as the Bell family braced themselves for the storm that was sure to come. The chill that swept through the Bell farmhouse on that fateful autumn evening in 1820 was unlike any other, a spectral breeze that whispered of ancient things. The air was thick with tension, as if the very walls had absorbed the palpable fear of the Bell family. The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows across the rough-hewn wooden beams, creating a dance of light and dark that mirrored the turmoil within. Not long before, the small community of Adams, Tennessee, had been abuzz with tales of the Bell Witch, an unseen force that had tormented the family for years. The once peaceful homestead had become a nexus of supernatural occurrences, and soon even the most skeptical of neighbors were drawn to the mystery that gripped the region. Among those intrigued was Andrew Jackson, a man whose future loomed large upon the horizon, already a figure of renown and ambition. On the night of Jackson's arrival, the air was electric with anticipation. The clattering of hooves echoed through the clearing as Jackson's entourage approached the Bell home, a group of burly men whose curiosity had compelled them to witness this enigma firsthand. They dismounted with a mixture of bravado and trepidation, their breath visible in the cooling night as they exchanged glances, half expecting the very specter that haunted the Bells to greet them. With a firm knock, Jackson rapped on the door, his presence commanding and resolute. The creaking of the hinges sounded like a lament as John Bell, weary and worn from years of torment, opened the door. He welcomed the men inside, his eyes betraying a mix of hope and dread, as if he feared the very entity they sought to confront would reveal itself in the presence of such esteemed guests. The farmhouse was a tapestry of unease, every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind outside amplifying the tension in the air. Jackson and his men settled into the parlor, their postures tense as they prepared to endure the night. They shared hushed conversations, recounting the tales of strange noises and ghostly encounters that had plagued the Bells, the inexplicable laughter, the disembodied voices, and even the physical assaults that had left John Bell reeling. As the clock struck midnight, a sudden chill enveloped the room, and a low, haunting voice filled the air, echoing off the walls. "I am the Bell Witch," it declared with a resonance that sent shivers down the spines of even the stoutest men. Jackson's eyes widened, his earlier bravado faltering as the entity continued to speak, its words weaving a tapestry of threats and revelations that left the men in stunned silence. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if the very essence of the house itself had come alive, manifesting the fears and doubts of all present. Jackson, ever the warrior, could not dismiss the gravity of the encounter. The entity seemed to know each man's name, each secret, twisting them into the fabric of its eerie narrative. As the hours passed, One by one, the men began to feel the weight of a presence that was both powerful and malicious. At last, unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere any longer, Jackson rose abruptly, his face pale, a sheen of sweat glistening on his brow. "This must be some trickery," he proclaimed, yet his voice wavered. With a swift motion, he gathered his men, and they fled the farmhouse. Their laughter now turned to nervous murmurs. The legend of the Bell Witch would only deepen with their flight, and as they rode away into the night, the whispers of the entity echoed in their ears, marking them forever with the chill of the unknown. In the chill of December 1820, the air surrounding the Bell homestead in Adams, Tennessee, was heavy with a foreboding silence, as if nature itself held its breath in mourning. The once lively farmhouse, often filled with laughter and the bustling sounds of chores, now echoed only the faint creaking of the wooden beams and the soft whispers of the wind. Inside, the flickering light from the hearth painted restless shadows upon the walls, where portraits of ancestors long gone seemed to observe the family's unraveling. John Bell lay in his bed, his body racked with a fever that had defied the best efforts of local physicians. His eyes, glazed with pain, stared into the dimness, and his breaths came in shallow gasps. The faint scent of herbs, brought by kind neighbors in their attempts to soothe his ailment, clashed with the acrid smell of decay that seemed to fill the room. His wife, Lucy, knelt beside him, her hands trembling as they brushed against his forehead, desperate for signs of relief. "John, my love," she whispered, her voice cracking with worry. "You must fight. You cannot leave us." But John's strength was waning, his once robust frame now a shadow of itself, and the fear that gripped Lucy's heart was a mirror to the growing dread among the children who lingered at the door, their faces pale and drawn. Word of John's illness had spread swiftly through the community, igniting a mixture of sympathy and superstition. Many whispered behind closed doors of the dark forces at play, of the curses that had befallen the Bell family since the arrival of the enigmatic Kate Batts. Rumors of witchcraft hung heavy like the winter fog that cloaked the valleys, and the townsfolk cast furtive glances toward the woods, where it was said Kate had communed with spirits. As the days slipped by, John's condition deteriorated. In the dim light of the early morning, his breath hitched, and a pallor enveloped him like a shroud. The children, hearing the muffled cries of their mother, began to gather, their small hands clasped together in prayer. On the night of December 20th, John Bell surrendered to the grip of his mysterious ailment. The stillness that followed his final exhalation was palpable, broken only by the soft sobs of Lucy, who crumpled to the floor, her wails echoing into the night. The news of his death spread like wildfire, igniting a mixture of grief and suspicion in the hearts of the townsfolk. John had been a respected farmer and a man of integrity, but now his passing seemed wrapped in the sinister threads of the supernatural. The Bell family, already beleaguered by the haunting that had plagued them for years, now faced a community that sought to assign blame. In the days that followed, a gathering of neighbors convened outside the Bell home, their faces drawn with concern, their voices hushed and urgent. "It is Kate the witch," one man declared, his voice trembling. "She has taken him as a sacrifice." The air crackled with tension as accusations flew, a storm of fear and superstition brewing among the townsfolk. They spoke of old grievances and whispered of retribution against Kate, whose very name had become synonymous with darkness and despair. As the Bell family mourned their beloved patriarch, the community wrestled with the implications of their tragedy. Caught in the throes of fear and the specter of witchcraft, the death of John Bell marked not just the loss of a man, but the dawning of a relentless cycle of suspicion that would haunt Adams for years to come, forever altering the course of its history. The chill of a late autumn evening wrapped around the Bell home, a once vibrant abode now shrouded in an oppressive gloom. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading leaves as the family gathered in the dim light of the flickering hearth. Shadows danced upon the walls, mirroring the unease that had settled deep within their hearts since John Bell's untimely demise. On that fateful night in December of 1820, the family had scarcely begun to heal from the weight of their loss when the familiar, unnerving voice of the spirit spoke once more. It was a sound they had come to dread, a haunting blend of familiarity and terror that echoed through the very grains of their home. The entity, which had tormented them for years, now held their collective breath in its spectral grasp. "I shall take my leave," it announced, the voice slithering through the air like a serpent. "But I shall return in 7 years." The proclamation sent a shiver down the spine of all present. Catherine, John's widow, her eyes wide with disbelief. Betsy, the youngest, who had borne the brunt of the witch's wrath, and even the stoic eldest son, Richard, who could only grip the edge of the table as if it were the last vestige of his sanity. The announcement rippled through the Bell family, transforming their grief into a quagmire of confusion and dread. What did it mean for their future? What malevolence lay hidden behind its promise of return? The townsfolk, too, felt the tremors of this unsettling declaration, their whispers weaving through the fields and forests, reaching every ear in Adams, Tennessee. Mothers drew their children close, and men gathered at the tavern to debate the implications. The Bell Witch, a specter that had haunted their lives, was not merely departing. It was orchestrating an ominous return. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, the Bell household became a canvas of tension. Catherine found herself gazing into the distance, lost in thought, as if searching for answers among the fading twilight. Betsy often awoke from nightmares, calling out to the darkness, her voice quivering with the fear of what was to come. Richard worked the fields, but his mind was a tempest. He could not shake the feeling that the witch's promise was a curse veiled in the guise of farewell. Then, in the spring of 1821, a heavy storm descended upon the land. The sky roared with fury, and rain lashed against the windows as though the heavens themselves mourned the Bell family's plight. It was then that the spirit's presence was felt anew, a whispering wind that swept through the house, rattling the shutters and extinguishing the flame of the hearth. The family huddled together, hearts pounding in unison, as the voice spoke once more, echoing through the chaos. "You shall remember me," it taunted, reverberating against the walls, a reminder of the anguish that had unfolded within these very rooms. "I shall return, and the tales of this night shall be told for generations." As the storm raged outside, the Bell family exchanged fearful glances, their fates entwined with the malevolent spirit that had infiltrated their lives. The promise of the witch's return loomed over them like a dark cloud, a harbinger of secrets yet to unfold, leaving the community to wonder about the true nature of the Bell Witch and her insidious intentions. The echoes of that night would linger long after the storm had passed, a chilling reminder that some spirits do not rest easy, and some promises bear a weight too heavy for the living to bear. The air hung heavy with the weight of sorrow as the Bell family settled into the oppressive silence that followed the tumultuous events of the past few years. Shadows danced in the flickering light of a hearth, and the wind whispered through the cracks of the cabin, carrying with it echoes of the past, of laughter turned to cries, of whispered secrets turned to haunted screams. In the dim light, John Bell sat at the rough-hewn table, his hands trembling slightly as they gripped the edges, the scars of grief etched deep into his weathered face, a testament to the toll the Bell Witch had taken on his family. Not merely a specter of the night, but a relentless force that had invaded their home, tormenting his beloved daughter, Betsy, with an intensity that defied reason. Her once vibrant spirit now lay dulled, the light in her eyes flickering like the dying embers of the fire. Outside, the twilight settled thick upon the landscape, draping the rolling hills and dense thickets in an eerie hush. The cries of the crows echoed ominously, as if heralding the dark legacy that was now entwined with the Bell name. The stories of the witch's malevolence had begun to seep through the region, whispered from one settler to another, morphing into tales that filled the hearts of the superstitious with dread. Each retelling twisted the truth further, embellishing the haunting into a local legend that would haunt the collective memory of Tennessee. Betsy, once the joy of the household, now sat by the window, her gaze lost in the gathering darkness. The specter had driven her to the brink of despair, and even her father's comforting presence failed to penetrate the veil of fear that enveloped her. It was said that the witch had taken a particular interest in her, a dark obsession that manifested in lashes of pain and torment, leaving her frail and trembling. John recalled the nights of shrieks and laughter that echoed through the night, an unnatural cacophony that had robbed them of peace. As the days turned into months, the Bell family's name became synonymous with the supernatural, a grim reminder of their plight. Neighbors began to arrive, drawn by an insatiable curiosity and a morbid fascination. They gathered around the flickering firelight, eagerly exchanging tales of their own encounters with the inexplicable, as if the very act of storytelling could somehow exorcise the darkness that had invaded their lives. But instead, each tale only deepened the shadows cast across the Bell homestead. In the heart of the community, divisions grew. Some stood steadfast by the Bell family, offering solace in their grief, while others speculated that John's dealings had summoned the witch's wrath. Whispers of wickedness and accusations of witchcraft floated through the air, thickening the atmosphere with mistrust and fear. Old grudges were reignited, and the fabric of neighborly ties began to fray. As winter settled upon Tennessee, the landscape transformed into a stark frozen tableau. The Bell family, now isolated by their own tragedy, remained ensnared in their haunted existence. The legend of the Bell Witch thrived, weaving itself into the folklore of the land, capturing imaginations and hearts alike. The specter that had once tormented them became a tale told around firesides, a morbid fascination that would echo through generations, a legacy of fear and intrigue, born of grief and sorrow, yet forever entwined with the spirit of the Bell family. In the chill of the autumn dusk, a shroud of unease settled over the Bell family homestead in Adams, Tennessee. It was the year 1828, and the echoes of laughter that once filled the air had long faded since the witch's promise was supposedly fulfilled. Yet as the foliage turned to fiery hues of crimson and gold, a restless wind carried whispers through the trees, hinting that the Bell Witch had not forgotten her pact. The sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across the rustic wooden cabin where John Bell stood on the porch, brow furrowed in thought. The evening air was thick with a tension that hung like fog, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Only the cawing of crows broke the silence, their black wings flapping ominously against the twilight sky. The farmers of the region had shared hushed tales of strange happenings, unexplained noises, and spectral visions that stirred dread in the hearts of the local inhabitants. Curiosity, however, had a way of turning to fear, and fear to desperation. A few nights prior, young Betsy Bell had been startled from her sleep by a cacophony of uproar, crashing sounds, and a sinister laughter that reverberated through the walls of their home. It was a sound that echoed the haunted tales of yore, stirring something deep within the community. The Bell family had long hoped to bury the past, but a specter was rising anew. As the days turned into weeks, the reports of disturbances multiplied. Neighbors spoke of shadows darting between trees and of a pungent odor pervading the air, reminiscent of decay. They had felt the ground tremble beneath their feet, as if the very spirit of the witch had returned to reclaim her dominion over the land. The local tavern buzzed with excitement and fear. Men gathered around flickering lanterns, recounting their own encounters, their voices low and urgent. The haunting was back, and it brought with it a feverish curiosity that threatened to consume them all. John Bell, determined to confront the specter of the past, sought the counsel of the townsfolk. He called a meeting beneath the starlit sky, where the flickering light of torches illuminated anxious faces. "We must lay this curse to rest," he declared, his voice steadied by a resolve born of necessity. "If the Bell Witch has returned, we ought to face her together." With each word, the air grew thick with tension. Whispers of skepticism and fear rippled through the crowd. Some believed that the witch had come to take vengeance upon the Bell family. Others thought that perhaps the disturbances were merely the result of restless spirits, or even the machinations of envious neighbors. Yet, despite their varying beliefs, a shared sense of unease bound them. They set forth into the woods, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps, hearts pounding in unison. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, their gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness enveloped them. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the night, shattering the silence and sending chills down their spines. The sound was familiar, a haunting, echoing laughter that danced among the trees. The Bell Witch had returned, and with her, the legends of old were reborn, weaving themselves into the very fabric of Tennessee's history. As the townsfolk stood trembling in the darkness, they realized that the past they wished to forget was very much alive, entwining their fates with a spirit that refused to be silenced. The Bell Witch would not be easily dismissed, and her story would endure, much like the shadows that lingered in the twilight.